Welcome everyone to Women and Gender Minorities in STEM, a monthly virtual speaker series brought to you by the Ecotarium. My name is Paige Curtis. My pronouns are she, her. I'm so excited to introduce our May 2021 speaker, Dr. Tanisha Williams. Welcome to Dr. Tanisha Williams, our Women and Gender Minorities in STEM speaker for the month of May. We're so happy to have you. Dr. Williams is a botanist, a science communicator, an advocate for social justice, and the founder of the Black Botanist Week hashtag. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you. I'm so excited to get to talk to you. I have so many questions. But to start off, could you share with us your preferred pronouns and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you so much for asking. She, her, hers. And I guess I'll go back to the beginning. I'm from Washington, D.C. I am currently a postdoc, which is after you graduate from your PhD program. It's very much like a residency for a doctor. So you're in another lab learning new skills before you get a real job. So I'm a postdoc at Bucknell University working with Dr. Christopher Martin, and we work on plants in Australia and in Pennsylvania.
I can't wait to dive into some more about those plants and your work. But our first question, as always, for women and gender minorities in STEM is, will you share with us a funny field or lab or industry or career story that you've experienced?
Yes, the first thing that pops up into my mind is a fieldwork story in South Africa. So I was in the Northern Cape of South Africa, so that's near the border that South Africa meets to Namibia, and I was looking for this pelargonium plant. So pelargoniums are the sister genus to geraniums that we have here in the States. And I was looking for this one plant, Pelargonium praemorsum. It has these beautiful white flowers. And I was driving up the side of a mountain, but this mountain had a kind of pathway through, I guess it's the cable lines. That's what it was. The cable lines had kind of like dug or blew through a pathway up this mountain. So I was like, oh, this is great. Like I had a tiny car and I didn't have to worry about like, going over boulders and things. I was just like, oh, this is a nice little pathway. So I was like going up this mountain and looking for this plant. I would stop, pull over. And then once I got to the top of the mountain, I kind of pulled over a little bit too much to the edge of the mountain. And so my, wheels got stuck on the side of a mountain. And I definitely had to climb down the mountain and ask for help. And so luckily there were some wonderful people that lived at the bottom of the mountain, and they got like several tow trucks and all this like wires and lines and ropes to help this little car off the side of a mountain. And that was, a really interesting fieldwork story. Actually, this is the first time that I've told this on camera about this story. So this is the first time that if my PhD, if both of them watch this interview, this will be the first time of them hearing about this. But I was safe, the car was safe, everything was fine, but it was definitely hanging off the side of a mountain.
Oh my God.
But I found the plant. So it was kind of worth it.
What was the reaction of the people who came to help you? Were they, I mean,
They were cracking up. They were like, "Oh, you American." So first they were like, "Okay, let's, like try to just like try to make sure this car doesn't like go falling down the side of a mountain." And then when they figured out that it was just like the back wheels, like most of the car was like on the road and it was going to be fine, they were just like, "Oh, what were you doing?" And I was like, I was just, I was actually trying to park towards the side just in case someone else came up or down the mountain. I wasn't trying to block the way. And I just got a little bit too close to the side.
I guess I wouldn't think of necessarily immediately the world of botany leading to so many adventures. which is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many stories that not even my own stories, when I think about like the nature planet and things like that, a lot of it tends to focus on the animals, but what the animals are surviving off of, what they're making their nests out of, what they're living throughout are the plants. So all of those shows where you're seeing all these wonderful animals, which I still get really excited about the animals as well, the plants are there as well. So there are scientists that are studying plants in these like these kind of what people say exotic places or international locations, but also in your backyard. There's tons of plants there. So wherever you go, whatever type of environment you can think of, there are some cool plants there that you could be studying.
That's so awesome. Well, speaking of, can you tell us what is botany? We've kind of alluded to it a little bit, but what is botany and why is it important?
So botany is just the study of plants. It's just scientists, and I will talk about this a little bit later on, but Black Botanist Week and we wanted to redefine botany, saying anyone that loves plants. So anyone that loves your house plants to, I mean, a child all the way up to a senior can be a botanist. You don't have to have a academic degree. It's someone that studies plants and loves plants, and it's such an important field because botany impacts everything that we do, from the air that we breathe to the medicines that we take, the paper that we write on, the clothes that are on our bodies. Everything we touch is a part of botany, and we often forget that growing up and in this world of technology and things like that. But botany is everywhere, and we need it. We need it to live.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting too, especially in the past year with the shutdown and the pandemic. A trend that I've noticed in people that I know, my friends and family members and acquaintances, is almost this return or desperation for something to do at first, and a lot of people have started gardening again and getting back into what we used to do however
Mhm.
many years ago, and making our growing our trying to grow our own food and things like that.
No, that's right. And even I got swept in. So I am a botanist and I also classify myself as a plant ecologist. So I'm interested in how plants interact with the environment around themselves. So that's the ecology part. But because I work in a greenhouse and things like that, I really didn't have a lot of plants at home pre-pandemic. Because I would forget about them because I'm focusing on these plants I really need to keep alive for my job. But because of the pandemic, I started bringing plants into my home, onto the patio that I have, started to exactly what you said, grow some of my food. And it's just been a wonderful experience. And I'm learning as well because I have never done any gardening or anything like that. But last summer, I definitely like picked up tons of peppers and tomatoes and stuff. And I was just like thrilled. I was like, oh, I just let me make this salad. Let me just go up on my porch and get these ingredients. So this summer I want to do the same thing because I had such a good time.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your path to your current career field has looked like? What drew you to botany?
That's a good question. As I look over this path and kind of think about everything that I've done, I'll definitely say what started me out was my great grandmother. I was born and raised by my great grandmother, and we had plants all over our home inside. Had a lot of indoor plants, some outdoor plants. Like she had a really lovely rose bush outside and things like that, but mainly indoor plants. And the African violets were something that I just like as a kid just loved to touch these African violets because of their fuzzy leaves. And so that started it out, but I still didn't know that botany was a career. You could like learn about plants for a living. That was something I didn't know about. And it really started, I would say I took a study abroad experience in my undergraduate career. Still wasn't a botany. I was environmental science major in undergraduate, but I went to Peru and learned about the rainforest and more about people using the resources and what that looks like. And so I was fascinated by the amount of plants in the rainforest and also the animals. We did plants and animals, but I really was fascinated by the plants and did a kind of honors thesis on mahogany persistence within the rainforest. And then I worked for 2 years and then went back and got my master's in environmental science again. And that's what really kicked off my botany journey. So in that program at Cal State LA, I interviewed with four um, master's advisors. Two were marine scientists because I was like, animals or plants. So two marine scientists and two plant scientists or botanists. And Dr. Stacy Lee Thompson just really sold me on these poplar trees throughout California and Nevada, and I haven't looked back since. So that was my master's work, looking at trees and their hybrids. And then for my PhD work, I went to Connecticut, the University of Connecticut, in their ecology and evolutionary biology program, and looked at how pelargonium plants that are found in South Africa are responding to climate change. So it's kind of it was really, I would say my master's and PhD were when I was doing that botanical work, really.
So in South Africa, studying the what plants were they that you're studying how they react to climate change?
Yes, pelargoniums. So it's the genus Pelargonium, sister genus to geraniums that we have here in the States. And I like to tell this fact is that the common geranium, those geraniums that you can buy at like Home Depot or Giant, are actually a pelargonium variety from South Africa. So a lot of people have seen pelargoniums before.
Yeah, I know exactly, like I know exactly what you're talking about. I can
Yeah.
visualize it at the grocery store. You can buy them.
Yes, yeah, yeah. They're very common because they have these beautiful flowers. Both pelargoniums and geraniums have these beautiful flowers. Pelargoniums are often more smelly. So in my lab, we call them smelly pellies because they smell like citronellum. So most of the candle scents and things like that, or if it's not, chemically manufactured, it's coming from pelargoniums. There's rose scented pelargoniums, almond scented pelargoniums, peppermint scented, like anything you can think of. Pelargoniums smell like good and also bad as well.
So what is the anthropogenic, am I saying that correctly? Anthropogenic climate
Anthropogenic.
change.
Yeah. Word in the front, anthropogenic, is just saying that it's human caused climate change. This is not a natural cycle that the earth is going through, because the earth has seen these natural cycles of climate change when we think about ice ages and things like that. But anthropogenic climate change, the reason why we're so concerned is that we're causing these huge kind of catastrophic events in the earth's history in such a short period of time. And so we're asking not only humans, but also our plants and animals to adapt to these increases in temperatures, increases in fire intensities or droughts and things like that, that they haven't seen in their lifetime, or even in their, I would say, evolutionary lifetime. So millions of years, we haven't seen these really fast changes to the Earth system. And so that's why scientists and people alike are just really concerned about what we're doing to the earth.
I'm curious what kind of I'm sure there's like studying, but I'm wondering, is there any unique I guess I'm imagining I'm imagining you finding, like, almost Indiana Jones style, like finding an old journal from someone who just like kept really great track of plants, but it was, 150 years ago. And I'm wondering, what kind of tools do you use to know what changes these plants are going through?
So I will tell you about my research, and then I'm going to well, let me first tell you about an Indiana Jones kind of story, then I'll tell you about my own research. So Henry David Thoreau actually had this cabin in Massachusetts, and he took those kind of really detailed notes of when the wildflowers came in, when they were blooming, what was blooming, how many, things like that. So scientists have used his journals to actually track how flowering has changed in response to increases in temperature throughout Massachusetts. Like, that is so cool. Like, just if you start to journal and have this extensive journaling, like, I know even people that garden, like every year they're writing down like when this bloomed and when they harvested this. Like, that is data, that is scientific data right there that you're writing down. So that Indiana Jones story is happening to an extent. And so what I use is Herbarium Records. So Herbarium Records are dried plants that are pressed on special paper to make sure that acid-free paper and things like that, to make sure that the specimens last for a good amount of time, meaning hundreds of years. And what I've collected was, or what I've used to understand climate change in South Africa are these Herbarium Records from the early 1900s all the way until about 2009. People have been collecting Pelargonium specimens throughout the country. And what I also had was weather station data. So I could track how mean annual temperatures have changed over the past 100 years throughout South Africa. And they've changed about 3 degrees in that time. And that's a very short amount of time. Just to make a comparison, the global average of climate change is about 0.8 degrees Celsius. So South Africa is almost like tripling that increase in temperature in the same amount of time. And in response to that increases in temperature, the pelargonium flowers are flowering about 2 weeks earlier because we're seeing this kind of warming up. They're like, oh, hey, like, it's time for us to flower in response to that increase in temperature. But that's using these historic records that people have been putting into these herbarium collections. So I always say, please, we need more collection facilities. We need to make sure we're keeping our collection facilities up to date, and we still have current collections. So even as I'm working in the lab now, when we go out collecting anywhere, we make sure we make herbarium specimens so that we never know who can use those specimens in the future.
My favorite thing about STEM is that STEM is so involved in so many aspects of everyone's life, but so many people don't think of it as STEM or the word STEM, the acronym STEM,
Yeah.
or the word science is intimidating,
Yep.
but everyone participates in it daily.
Exactly. When you're on your cell phone making that social media post, you are interacting with technology, which is a part of STEM, and you're collecting data, you're using data, you're generating data. That's all STEM right there. Yeah, so I mean, just like we open up the term for botany for anyone that loves plants, I think STEM is much wider than um, what we've been taught in the past, as far as what a scientist looks like. Now we know scientists have always been any color, shape, flavor, anything that you want, and that's more present now. But the same thing with people that don't have science degrees. I know plenty of, especially because of Black Botanist Week, the house plant and gardening groups on social media. I say they know more about plants than I do, and I went to school for it. So, because they're out there in the ground, they're out there every day, or in their home gardens and things like that. That I'm really not doing. I'm in a lab.
Well,
So,
perfect segue because I you are the founder of Black Botanist Week. Can you tell us about the inspiration to start the hashtag and what came of it? I know it was amazing, but I'd love to hear from you.
I always say that this was a group effort. There's Black Botanist Week has a committee member. There's 12 of us from the US, UK, and South Africa that came together. But I'll back up from there and just say what started this. What actually started this was Black Birders Week. They were the first Black in or Black weeks during last summer, and I participated in that week. I'm not a birder, although I look at birds now because of that week. But they had a couple hashtags that were more general, not geared towards birding. It was Black in Nature. That was the first day. And I just love seeing all of these beautiful Black people that love being outdoors and hiking like I did. And I was like, oh, there's so many more of us out there. I'm not the only one. So it was really nice to find this online community. It was at the height of the pandemic. We were all locked in our homes, but to be able to connect with these people that just love nature and love being outside, whether it's looking at birds or looking at plants or even insects. There's been so many weeks. So interacting with that week, I was like, I have to bring this energy and this joy to the botanical community. So I'm the founder, but that just means I sent out the first tweet. And then after that, there were 11 other people that showed up for all of our meetings, and we got our Black Botanist Week together in July, I think the second week of July, and it just really took off. And we had no expectations. We just wanted to band together to uplift each other. We wanted to find more Black people that love plants, and we just put it out on the internet, and it grew. Like, I think the first day we interacted with over like 50,000 to 100,000 people around the world. It was just, it went off like fire. We had no idea it was going to be like that, and it's just been a wonderful, wonderful just initiative that I could have never thought would have yeah, would have grown this big in such a short amount of time.
As an onlooker, I when the Black Birders Week kicked off and the Black AF in STEM hashtag started going around, and that's actually how I found the Black Botanist Week hashtag, is through the Black AF in STEM. A theme that I noticed, and something that you mentioned as well, is this feeling of I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. And um I'm curious, what do you feel the importance of representation in STEM is, and kind of in conjunction with that, how do you think these social media movements, positively or negatively or neutrally, how do you think those two play together in sharing representation and making it more visible, maybe?
I think one of the things that came out of Black Botanist Week that really sums up why representation matters was a tweet. And I often always have to dig for it, but I'll never forget there was a woman that tweeted at me, and she said, "Oh, I'm so happy to see that you started Black Botanist Week. It's been such a joy to interact with you and the Black Botanist Week committee member, because I never knew that botany was a career option, and I have never seen a Black person in botany. So you make me think that I can do this." And I just like jumped on that tweet. I was like, "You can do this." I was like, "Whatever you want to do, you can be a botanist, you can just," I was super excited. And that kind of sums up to me, is seeing someone that looks like you doing something that you may want to do, or maybe you've never even heard of, but just seeing someone that looks like you that can do it, and you're saying, "Oh, well, if they can do it, then maybe I can do it because they look like you, or maybe they've come from your same neighborhood or have a similar background." um, that's that's huge as far as example of like a concrete example of why representation matters. For someone else to say that you can do something is, I think, is still needed. I think we need mentors and people from all walks of life to encourage us and to have a support system. But it's something different when someone that looks like you says that you can do this too.
Do you feel like you saw representation of yourself in STEM fields as you were growing up? And do you think that that has shifted and changed since you were a kid?
Yeah, so I was lucky to have seen some representation in STEM. So I'm from Washington D.C., and there are a lot of Black people there. So I was able to see Black people in STEM, mainly in engineering and math fields. So I went to a program at the University District of Columbia, had this program that was sponsored by the National Science Foundation called Saturday Academy, where I think I started in Definitely in junior high school. I think I started in elementary school, junior high school, and then some in high school. You would, during the school year, you would go every Saturday to this like STEM camp. And then during the summer, you would go Monday through Friday. And we built robots. I mean, all sorts of math problems. I remember learning about the stock exchange, taking math courses and other engineering courses there. I actually, from that program, I wanted to be an engineer when I made my first major at Penn State in my undergrad was engineering. And then I switched because I was like, I don't really like it as much. We're not building rockets and well, you had to learn a little bit more before you got to there, but I was spoiled because I was building rockets like in junior high school. So I was like, I don't know about these classes. Um, but so I did see representation. There were, I would say that the gender the genders of what I was seeing were predominantly male, but they were still Black people. And they were still people telling me that I could be an engineer, I could be a mathematician, I can be a scientist, or whatever. We learned computer science and things like that. So I was lucky in that instance to have kind of this like supplementary program where I could enjoy STEM and have people say that you could be a scientist like me. But as far as just in general, like I'm thinking about my just college careers, and I went to predominantly white institutions. I could have gone to other types of institutions and probably would have got a different, not probably, I would have definitely gotten a different educational journey, but being at predominantly white institutions because of, that's where my scholarships were. I definitely didn't see a lot of people that looked like me that were encouraging me that I could do these things. So that was a struggle. And I think had I had a little bit more of that, maybe I would have stayed in engineering, but that's another lifetime. And I'm so happy that I fell into botany and no regrets, no turning back. Like I love what I do right now. But that's just a side note. Who knows? Maybe I still would have never liked engineering. But I still think engineering is such a wonderful field. Like I'm fascinated by the minds of engineers, and I'm always kind of like reading up on it because it's amazing what engineers do.
Yeah.
But
That's so
yeah, so I did have some representation early on that was impactful. And there were different programs. So throughout my college career, there like LSAMP and McNair Scholars and all of these programs that really try to help marginalized communities and give them some sense of community within like larger institutions. And so that was helpful for me as well, as far as seeing um, people that may or may not look like me. The programs that I were in were predominantly Hispanic serving programs, but I'm still I'm still marginalized. So I was definitely a part of those programs, but just seeing people that were not white that were making these accomplishments in science and technology and engineering and math was just inspiring to see someone else that it is a big deal to have someone that looks like you say that you can do that, and they have the paperwork, like they've done it.
well, and now you're one of those people.
I hope so. I hope I'm like encouraging the next round of young scientists and letting everyone know that you can do it. And please contact me if you have any questions.
I love that. Well, and I mean, based on the reception of the Black Botanist Week hashtag, I would say I think we can confirm that you are inspiring people. And
Thank you so much.
congratulations. I think it's really amazing. It's been amazing to see the surge of people of connections from people all over the globe, and making exactly the connection that you said of I'm not alone.
Hmm.
And I think that's just congratulations. You're such a big part of that, and what an amazing movement.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been eye-opening on all fronts, like our Black Botanist Week, but just all of the other weeks that have come out of it. Like I've learned about so many different aspects of science, and also there was science communication and education focuses. There was an Black in art focus outside of the STEM realm as well, or STEAM, because that that includes the art, which I think is great. Just all of these weeks and all of these Black people that are doing this great work that you don't hear about, but having the social media platform, kind of wrapping back around to your, I think a couple questions ago that I didn't answer. I think social media, of course, there are pros and cons with everything, but if we're using it in this way to connect one another and to reach out and learn about one another, I think it's a good tool in using that, and especially during a pandemic where we actually can't be physically with each other, we can connect online and have these Zoom meetings and things like that where we're not feeling alone, and we see people that look like us that are doing these cool things, and you learn so much. Like I've learned so much about like sharks and I mean all sorts of things that I didn't know about because I'm following a diverse audience, and not only Black people, although my Black people have definitely bumped up on on my Twitter and Instagram, but just following all sorts of people just doing cool work.
You're amazing.
Thank you.
Great. Tanisha, my next question. I'm wondering if you could just walk us through a day in the life of you.
Yeah, it depends on which day it is, but I'll tell you a little bit about what I did or what I'm going to do this week. So in the mornings, I go to the greenhouse and I water our plants, and I make sure we don't have any pests or anything like that. So I spend a couple hours in the greenhouse, and then I come into the lab. And right now we're doing a round of DNA extraction. So we're trying to use population genomics methods to understand gene flow of plants and different questions like that. And so in order to do that, we have to like smash up these plants, the leaves and things like that, and go through this like 20-step protocol on getting this purified DNA from the leaves of plants. So I've had done that for about a student and I, undergraduate student researcher here, and I have done, where are we? Like 400 individuals we've done that for over a couple months, because it takes a while, and because of COVID, scheduling who can be in the lab at the time. But yeah, so we're actually in the final stages of shipping this DNA off to a genomics center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and they're going to actually sequence the DNA, and that's where we get our ATGCs and all that, and so we can tell who's who and what's going on. So that's kind of in the day of my life. A lot of time is spent right now in front of a computer, and that's because I'm doing a lot of writing. So a lot of the projects, that herbarium project, I've started to wrap up writing that. And in at least in academia, you want to publish your work once you've got it to a place and you have your data analysis and things like that. You want to publish it in a scientific journal. So I am working on publishing a couple papers, so doing a lot of writing, a lot of reading, um, and data analysis. So yeah, computer work, but then I get to go to the greenhouse and then I get to do some lab work. So it makes it like fun because you get to like walk and stand up from looking at the computer for hours on end. So yeah.
It sounds like you have pretty good balance, maybe, and maybe throughout the year, throughout a project as well, that you kind of get to do a little bit or a lot of it. You get to do a lot of things, which
Yes.
must be nice.
Yeah, it's nice seeing the project from beginning to end. So like for my PhD work, like I collected the data, like would be in South Africa, collecting this data, bringing it back to the United States and doing whatever I needed to do with them, mainly like measuring a lot of leaf characters and things like that, and then doing the data analysis and then writing that story up. So, kind of giving you like a history of why I wanted to do this project and experiment, and then what I found, and then what the results mean, and then publishing that work. So, I get to go through the entire scientific process, and that's really cool because exactly what you said, it's a balance. So some days you want to just be in front of your computer and writing, and other days you want to be out in the field collecting specimens. And I get that luxury of doing that, although I'm not doing as much field work stuff right now, but I've done a lot of it. So, and I can supplement that by being in the greenhouse.
That's great. So what is your favorite, I gotta ask, what is your favorite thing about your career? Um, or the biggest perk?
Ooh, I the favorite thing about my career, and this is just as a scientist in general, is that I get to ask questions. Like if I'm curious about something, I get to ask the question and then I get to answer that question. Like I think that's so cool that we still don't know so much about the world around us. Like I was baffled when I came to this Australia system, and I was just like, oh, okay, let me read up on Australia, like kind of learn a little bit about the plants on Australia, because I hadn't been, definitely hadn't been thinking about those only South African plants for the past like 6 years. So I was like, let's learn this new system. And then I was reading in a scientific article, and then I saw more articles that were saying that over 70% of the plants in Australia have yet to be described and or discovered. And I'm like, what? So we only know 30% of the plants in Australia? I was, I was like, I was baffled. I was like, what have we been doing? Like, what? So now I'm like super excited to be working in Australia. Actually, we're describing two unknown species in the lab right now. So, and they are Solanum species. They are, Solanum is the genus that has, or um, Solanaceae has like your eggplants, tomatoes, potatoes, all the yummy crops and things like that. So we are describing two bush tomatoes out of Australia. And I'm just like, this is amazing. Like we get to describe a new species, give it a name. Like yeah. When I was younger, I used to think that everything was described. We knew everything, and the older I get, I'm like, we know nothing. Like we know nothing about this world.
It does. It feels like I would expect that to be something that would need to be done if we were to like find another Goldilocks planet that has vegetation on it.
Yep.
That's wild. Like we have a continent where there's
A whole
lots of stuff
continent.
that doesn't have any.
You know, we there's so many things that we don't know about it that we're still learning, which makes it super exciting. This is why people spend careers, like who I work with. Dr. Chris Martin has spent his career in Australia trying to figure out what these bush tomatoes are doing. He is looking more at like the reproductive side of things, but he's also described a lot of new species while going looking for these plants. And I'm just like, that is so amazing that you can go somewhere and just be like, this looks so different, I have never seen this plant before. Then you go back to the herbarium, so those herbariums always coming in, you go back to the herbarium and you check and you're like, no, this plant has never been recorded. Or maybe there's one herbarium sheet and there's no name for the plant, it just says solanum, because we know it's a solanum, but like no one knows where it goes. And then you start doing this detective work and you're like, okay, this is a new species. Like this is brand new to science. And it's just like, it's so exciting and rewarding. It's so cool.
That's amazing. I'm like getting excited for you. In 2021, I say, exactly again, parroting what you're saying, what you said, I thought it was all for the most
Mhm.
part discovered. Or if you wanted to discover something new, it would have to be like something new in like at the atomic level because we didn't have the technology until now. But But no,
Yes,
you can just walk out and find a plant, be like, hey.
there's a whole plant. That's the whole population of plants that are living in this like extreme environment or things like that. I know with Australia, some of the reason is that the landscape. So a couple in the northern part of Australia, there are uh, different landscapes that are flooded, and then they have crocodiles, and so you can't get into these places for many months out of the year. And then what I'm hearing, because I haven't been yet, is that the park rangers actually go and they check to make sure that there's like low levels of water, there's no crocodiles before they let humans into certain areas. And then it's like super hard to get to some of these places. So some of it is that it's just really hard for humans to get to these places. And so that's why we haven't kind of discovered or described these species, because we haven't been there yet, or only one person has made it there and they got as much as they could. But yeah, we're still trying to describe and discover all of these species. So every year, I forget the number, but there are thousands of plants and animals that are being described and discovered every year. So we still have a lot of
Wow.
cataloging to do, just at the very basic level of trying to figure out how many species are on Earth and what they are.
I gotta say, I I thought you were going to say one person would make it out there and then they got eaten by a crocodile. It took a total direction. That's
Maybe, but I haven't heard that.
they finally made it and they got eaten.
I know, yeah. And then that's exactly why we don't have that
Yeah.
specimen.
That's so cool though. I mean, it's just so cool to know that there's still so much to discover. So
Yes.
on the
Yeah.
flip side of that, what's your least favorite thing or the most mundane or most annoying thing about about your career field?
Writing, writing. I know they say the more you do it, the better you get at it, and that's something I really need to practice on. But the writing part of it, like I love doing the experiment in data analysis, but the writing is a struggle for me. Like I to sit down and write a whole paper from beginning to end, and obviously I'm not doing it from beginning to end, but write certain sections, it is a struggle for me. So yes, you there are writing for sure.
Well, I'm sure it's hard too to feel like, oh yeah, let me sit down at this computer when there's thousands of plant species to go discover. Like, come on.
Hey, I could be going over there
Yeah, let me
finding these new species.
That's
Yeah.
I can identify with that. The action is
But you have to document, just like you talked about the Indiana Jones and those records and herbarium records, like we have to document this stuff. So it's very important, but that doesn't make it less painful for me.
you mean you can't just say that to yourself and you're like, cool, let's go. Like
Yeah, like, okay, let's write this paper one
I'm
day.
ready now. So I have two last questions for you, and the very last one will just be any last words of wisdom you have for us. But before we get to that, I'm wondering, do you have any advice, or what advice would you give to anyone at any age who is thinking that botany or something along those lines might be something they'd like to explore further?
Yeah, I would say definitely look into if there's a botanical society close to you, a university, community college that's close to you. A lot of these institutions have free programs and internships that you could be a part of to learn more about the plants. And then also, now that we have our cell phones, iNaturalist is an app that you can have on your cell phone. So you can go out into your backyard, take pictures of plants in your yard or in your neighborhood, and get to know the plants within your own neighborhood, and then maybe expand and explore out with I would definitely say make sure that you're growing in groups and teams as you're hiking and doing these things for safety reasons. But iNaturalist, and there are other apps as well. I think Plant Snap is an app that you can snap a photo of a plant, and it will give you a couple different options about maybe this species or that species if you want to learn more about like how to identify plants. But yeah, just getting out there really. It's just getting out into your neighborhood, taking some walks, identifying the garden clubs or the botanical societies close to you.
Okay, so Tanisha, our last question. Do you have any parting thoughts, last words of wisdom for us?
I would say just thinking about things that I did on this journey is one, always ask questions. And two, if you see someone in a position or in a stage of their life and you feel their journey is really cool or their research or what have you, ask them if you could like have like an informational interview. I used to call them coffee dates, but since we're on this, which I guess makes it even better since we're on this kind of a Zoom thing, that means you can talk to anyone in the world right now. It doesn't have to be someone that you can physically go get coffee with, and ask them about their journey. I've learned so much about people and their journey, also different funding opportunities, different types of internships and things like that. So if you find a cool person, ask them some questions. All they can do is say no, and I would say 9 times out of 10, especially if they're not like super busy, they're going to say yes, and people love talking about themselves. So ask people questions.
Amazing advice. And thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. This has been such an amazing interview. I could keep asking you questions for hours, but we'll go ahead and end it there. I'm really looking forward to having you back for our Q&A session, so we'll pepper you with even more questions.
Yes.
And thanks so much, Tanisha.
And thank you so much, Paige, for inviting me. And this was so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you. We hope to see you all at our live Q&A with Tanisha on Thursday, May 27th at 4 p.m. Eastern. Registration can be found at ecotarium.org.